Ever had a chance to visit a forest? Or just imagine one: tall trees touching the sky, wild animals roaming freely, and countless organisms living together, from tiny producers to fierce tertiary and quaternary consumers. But here's the surprising part: this dense forest wasn't always like this. In fact, it all began with nothing but barren land and rocks, a place where you'd think life could never flourish. So how does a lifeless landscape transform into a thriving forest ecosystem? There's a fascinating natural process behind it, and it's called ecological succession. Let's understand how nature builds life step by step. So, what exactly is succession? Succession is basically a progressive change, a step-by-step transformation in nature. In ecology, it's defined as the gradual process by which the species composition of an ecosystem changes over time. In simple terms, one group of species slowly replaces another, as the environment becomes more suitable for new forms of life. This entire journey begins with the pioneer community, the first organisms to colonize a barren area, and ends with the climax community, a stable, balanced ecosystem that can sustain itself for years to come. This transition of life isn't limited to land alone. It also happens in water. When succession takes place in an aquatic environment, it's known as a hydrosphere. And when the same process occurs on dry land, it's called a xerosphere. So, whether it begins in a pond or on a rocky surface, the story of succession is nature's way of turning emptiness into abundance, one stage at a time. It all begins with barren rocks and lifeless land, a place where you'd think life could never exist. But nature always finds a way. Sometimes, a traveler might drop a fruit peel, or birds flying overhead leave behind their droppings. These traces of organic matter become the first foundation of life. Soon, these nutrients attract the very first living settlers, the pioneer community. And among them, the true survivors, lichens. Lichens are not a single organism, but a partnership between fungi and algae. The fungus releases enzymes that dissolve minerals from the rock, while the algae make food through photosynthesis. Together, they form a mutual bond, each helping the other to survive in the harshest of conditions. At this early stage, the dominant type is crustose lichens, flat, crust-like species that cling tightly to the rocky surface. They are perfectly adapted to thrive on the Earth's crust, where almost nothing else can live. Slowly, these crustose lichens begin the weathering of rocks, a process that breaks down the hard surface both physically and chemically. Over time, small cracks appear, organic matter builds up, and the first thin layer of soil begins to form. Now, with enough organic material and plenty of sunlight, the pioneer community reaches its full bloom, creating the perfect foundation for the next wave of life to begin. When the crustose lichens have done their part, nature prepares for the next phase of life. A new and slightly more complex group of organisms is ready to take over. Our journey now enters the second stage, the Foliose lichen stage. In this stage, Foliose lichens begin to grow on the weathered rocks. They have leaf-like bodies and tiny root-like structures, though these aren't true roots, they're called rhizoids. These rhizoids absorb nutrients from the surface, while the leaf-like lobes capture sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. It's the perfect setup for growth, enough light, moisture, and minerals for these lichens to thrive. But this success comes with a cost. As Foliose lichens spread their broad, leaf-like forms, they begin to cover the crustose lichens beneath them, blocking sunlight. Slowly, the crustose lichens start to die off, but their decay adds even more organic matter to the developing soil. Step by step, the surface becomes richer and softer, a sign that the land is preparing for the next wave of life to arrive. With the land now partially softened and enriched by the lichens, a new chapter of life begins. Carried by the wind, tiny moss spores drift through the air. And when they find a surface that's moist, slightly shaded, and rich in organic particles, they begin to grow. This marks the beginning of the moss stage, a crucial phase in ecological succession. Mosses are small, green plants with delicate leaf-like structures and slender rhizoids, which act like tiny anchors. These rhizoids help the moss cling to the moist surface and absorb water and dissolve nutrients directly from it. As mosses spread across the rocks, their dense mats hold moisture, prevent erosion, and trap wind-blown dust and organic debris. This further increases the soil depth and fertility, preparing the land for more complex life forms. However, as mosses thrive, their thick green carpet shades the foliose lichens beneath them. Cut off from sunlight, those lichens begin to die and decompose, adding yet another layer of organic matter to the growing soil. By now, the surface is no longer bare rock. The soil is thin but rich in humus, retaining moisture and nutrients. It's soft, dark, and alive, ready to welcome the next community that will take succession one step further. With the soil now moist, enriched, and deep enough to support roots, the stage is set for the next community, the herbaceous plants. The wind brings in seeds and spores of small grasses, ferns, and flowering herbs from nearby areas. These seeds find the newly formed soil ideal for germination. There's sunlight, moisture, and just enough nutrients to support early plant growth. Soon, the once barren land is covered with a green layer of soft grasses and small herbs. Their roots penetrate the thin soil, holding it together firmly and preventing it from being washed away by rain. These plants also add more organic matter as they die and decay, further enriching the soil. Their leaves shade the surface, keeping it moist and cool, while their fallen remains contribute to a thick, fertile layer of humus. However, their presence also brings change. The taller, faster-growing herbs begin to outcompete mosses for sunlight and space. Gradually, the mosses start to disappear, their death once again feeding the soil with organic nutrients. By the end of this stage, the land has transformed dramatically. The soil is now richer, darker, and deeper, capable of supporting larger and more complex vegetation. Nature is now ready for its next chapter, the arrival of shrubs and small woody plants, signaling the approach of a young forest. Now begins the shrub stage, a period of growing strength and competition. Seeds of woody shrubs and bushes are carried by wind, water, and birds, settling into the nutrient-rich soil left behind by the herbaceous plants. These shrubs have stronger stems and deeper root systems, allowing them to tap into moisture and minerals far below the surface. Their roots help bind the soil firmly, reducing erosion, while their fallen leaves continue to add humus and increase fertility. This combination creates a stable environment, ideal for sustaining larger forms of vegetation. But in nature, growth always comes with struggle. The fast-spreading shrubs outcompete the smaller herbs and grasses, shading them from sunlight and taking up the available nutrients. Gradually, the herbaceous plants begin to disappear, and shrubs dominate the scene, transforming the area into a dense, bushy landscape. With each passing season, the soil becomes richer, moister, and thicker, capable of supporting even taller vegetation. Birds and small animals now start to inhabit this environment, contributing to the cycle of nutrient recycling through their waste and decaying matter. This marks the beginning of a transitional ecosystem, one that stands midway between grassland and forest. And soon, this thriving shrubland will give way to something even grander, the rise of trees, leading us into the climax stage of ecological succession. Now begins the young forest stage, a time of rapid growth and expansion. Seeds of pioneer tree species like pines, birches, or willows find ideal conditions to germinate. These trees grow quickly, racing toward the sunlight, forming a loose and uneven canopy. Beneath them, sunlight still reaches the ground, allowing small shrubs and herbs to survive for a while. However, as these trees grow taller, their leaves start to block the light, shading out the lower plants. The soil becomes cooler, more humid, and even richer with fallen leaves and decomposing wood. As time passes, the young forest transforms into an old or mature forest, stronger, denser, and more diverse. Here, slower growing but long-living trees like oaks, deodars, or maples begin to replace the earlier, fast-growing species. The forest floor is now covered with thick layers of leaf litter and humus, home to countless insects, fungi, and microorganisms that keep recycling nutrients. This stage supports a wide range of wildlife, birds, mammals, reptiles, and decomposers, all interacting within a balanced system. The air is cooler, the ground moist, and the canopy almost closed, nature's architecture at its finest. Finally, after many years, sometimes centuries, the ecosystem reaches stability. This is the climax community, the final, self-sustaining stage of ecological succession. So, this entire journey, from the pioneer community on barren rocks to the stable climax community, is known as primary succession. It's called primary because life begins here from scratch, on land where no previous life existed. That's why it's an extremely slow process, often taking thousands of years to reach the final, balanced stage of a mature ecosystem. But nature doesn't stop there. Sometimes, disasters strike. A forest fire, a flood, or even human destruction can wipe out the climax community. When that happens, the process begins again, but not from bare rock this time. The soil still holds traces of life, seeds, roots, spores, and organic matter, waiting to grow back. This renewed process is called secondary succession, and unlike primary succession, it's much faster, because nature already has a head start. The memory of life still remains. So, from lifeless rock to a thriving forest, and even through destruction and rebirth, succession shows us one powerful truth: nature never gives up. It rebuilds, renews, and continues the cycle of life, again and again. I hope you enjoyed exploring this beautiful process of nature's progression. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep learning with me. See you in the next video.